Hey guys, what's going on? It's Grim here, Grim Gaming UK. And first off, apologies if I sound a bit sniffly. I've got a summer cold or something like a tart. But anyway, what is this beloved map we see before us? This is, of course, if you can read, it is firing range or studio, depending on what generation and what COD you're used to and whatever have you. So, why do I have a map of firing range on? Well, I'll give you a brief background. I did a video the other day and it was on grind, and basically came across as a bit of a me being a miserable git and moaning about the new maps. That's not what it was intended to be at all. I was trying to discuss about the dynamic new maps we're potentially going to have with Call of Duty Ghosts. So I decided that I'm going to put away the gameplay video and I would go through boring slides like a middle-aged businessman with a PowerPoint presentation that was done extremely badly. So this is why I'm on firing range. So let's crack on with the first slide. This is what This is what we're used to. This is the current Call of Duty dynamics of a map. Now, this is what I meant on grind by that it's symmetrical. It's obviously not. Aesthetically, it is not a symmetrical map. But it's the paths of travel. Now, don't laugh at my bad PowerPoint presentation style. Uh, but anyway, the blue team, as you can see, can either push to the gold star in the centre, which is normally the big clusterfuck firefight that everybody gets into. As again, going back to the grind, the ramps and that in the middle, the two windows, that's the big clusterfuck in the centre. But you can also push to the left and to the right and go those flanking routes. Now, on firing range, those flanking routes take you down past the firing range section, if you were the red team, to the right. Or again, if you're the red team, you can go to the left and up behind the caravan, and vice versa. If you're the blue team, you go left or right. Now, those flanking routes are designed so A, you don't get spawn trapped, or B, so that you've got a way of flanking the enemy should they be really dug in the centre of the map. Now, there have been in Call of Duty history several maps that have foregone this, and those tend to be the most crazy and hectic. Nuketown is a prime example. There's no flank routes. You are head on, and that's it. It's a war of nutrition. You grind each other down. Wetwork, Rust, those maps have that kind of just crazy bang into each other. Just as I say, war of nutrition, grind each other down. But it's tended to push more towards this becoming the standard map design with left and right flank routes and the firefight in the middle. Now, some have kind of changed that dynamic. The Detour, the new one with Vengeance, and also Hijacked have kind of created the. It's going to be a head-on collision, but there's multiple levels. So rather than a left and right flank route, you've got levels you can go on. So you can go underneath the boat. In Detour, you'll be able to go underneath the sort of the bridge, so into the service sort of ducting and then pop up. So that's a new way of doing it as well. But this is standard, and obviously, you're going to say, oh yeah, but the spawns flip. That's my next one. I'm not going to dwell on this one because it's pretty much more of the same. But as you can see, the spawns are flipped. You've got one behind caravan, you've got one down at the firing range end, and again, you've got the big firefight in the middle you can both charge into, or you've got left and right flanking routes. Okay, that's all good. I'm not going to, as I say, stick about with this. We're going to move on to more exciting things. Grim, just a quick one. I hate to burst your bubble, but this is not actually any more exciting. I know. Bear with me. Now, as you'll see, there's lots of orange blobs and there's some gold blobs. Now, the gold blobs I will quickly talk about because this is literally the only bit I'm going to talk about with them. They would be, say, control points for user interactive traps. I don't overly agree with it myself, but there you go. As long as, say, you get the points, but the kills didn't go towards streaks or whatever, fuck it, put it in, if that's what they want to do. But yeah, if you put those gold stars, those control points for certain traps on the outside of the map, you'll shift the dynamic. Most of the time, people focus on the centre of a map. If you put them on the outside, you'll get some people wanting to focus and move off to the outside of the map. And to be fair, that's got plus points and down points. You stretch the map out because people want to push to the sides to get to these control points, but not having them in the centre means that you will get people just camp on them. And I don't know, if you've got a button that creates or sets off an acid trap and there's a monitor above it so they can see the people that are moving around so they can set it off at the right time, you're going to get somebody just camping that and being a douche. And if they're on the outside of the map, there is a slightly removed chance that people won't go hunting for them, whereas if it was in the two centre buildings on firing range, it's far more likely that people will hunt them and kill them because it's a higher area of activity. But that's all I want to talk about with gold. I don't overly agree with having user interactive traps. I think there's enough bullshit in Call of Duty. But that's my only negative. Let's move on to the orange blobs. Now, the orange blobs represent various things, whether you consider it firing range or studio. But we'll go with the orange circle furthest left. Now, that represents either a jeep if it's firing range, or say the big alien if it was studio. The orange rectangle in the centre represents the tower that's there. Now, whether that be the castle tower or the sniper tower, whatever you want to call it from range or studio, that's what that represents. On the far side, on the right, that big long rectangle represents the firing range or the pirate area. Now, I'll get into that more detail about that later. Let's move on to the next slide because I know it's boring looking at a static slide. So here we go. Now, I know what you're going to say. This one doesn't actually look that different from the last one, and I completely agree. But I'll kind of go into the details of it, and hopefully it will make sense to go along. Apologies if it doesn't, but here we go. You will notice the left-hand side orange circle blob that was our Jeep or alien has moved slightly from the last slide. And that's because, I don't know, you could say, if you remember the map Discovery, you could throw C4 at the bridges and blow them up and they collapse. Now, you could potentially have that here, where if you threw C4 at the alien's legs or at the Jeep, it would blow up and it would move, or whatever. Or you just have it that it's a dynamic event that will happen. Now, I wouldn't have this like the trains in WMD or the rocket in launch, because they were set to particular times that it would happen. Now, that's boring. You don't want that for a dynamic event. It's meant to be dynamic. So I would have potentially this could never happen. It could, or it could happen at various times in the game. It isn't a set thing. Or again, as I say, you could throw C4 at the legs, blow up the alien or blow up the Jeep, and this would happen. Now, as you'll see the way it's situated, it either falls to the left or the right of that door, potentially cutting off that whole, if you're the blue team or the red team, that whole route down that side for the trailer, or it gives you access to the trailer without fear of being picked off from the bunker or for the other end. So, already just by doing that simple one thing, you've shifted dynamic hugely of the map, and it makes good players have to change their play style, and it makes bad players might help them out. Who knows? Anyway, on to the next one. Oh, bless you, Grim. Somebody spilt fucking bean juice all over your nice map. Yeah, apologies. My rectangle on the right-hand side has become huge, and that is because this dynamic event involves flooding if it's on studio, or a big sandstorm if you're on studio. So, what would happen is, again, none of these are preset. They could all happen together, or none at all, or whatever. So this is just a dynamic thing that will happen or not happen. Now, excuse me, I apologise for that. This sandstorm... Now, we'll go with the flooding because it's easy to explain. But what would happen is, all of a sudden, I don't know, a pump or whatever is broken. The water comes crashing over from the little pirate studio area and floods this whole area up to where... If you remember, it starts to lift up, the ramp starts to go up towards Middle Tin, or towards that star to the gold star to the top there, just on the very edge of the bean juice. So, or to the metal container, obviously, which is to the south. The land starts to rise up, so the flood water would flood up to there. Now, if it was the flood water, if any of you know from having jumped in the water on raid, it slows your movement down a lot. I think it slows it down to like 50% or something. So all of a sudden you're heavily burdened trying to get through that. Now that screws up that flanking route. You want to go around that way, fine, but it's going to take you twice as long. Or, if it's the sandstorm effect, again, you could say it would be basically a big brown smoke grenade had gone off in that area. So literally that whole area would be thick with brown. You could move as quickly as you can, but visibility would be down to as if you were walking through a smoke grenade. Now, what that would change is potentially you could have if this was a common occurring dynamic event, could potentially bring that into your perks. You could say, well, tack mask or whatever will actually protect you from those dust clouds and that you can still see through them, or thermal goggles, you can see through them. You could also have I do apologise. You could have people with thermal sights would actually go, the smoke or the dust clouds appeared, I'll go down that end and I can sit there with my LMG in the dust cloud. It makes, again, it changes the dynamic, but you could be lugging around an LMG with a thermal waiting for that event to happen and it never happens. So again, the main thing is it changes the routes. It changes the fact that that whole end of the map suddenly actually becomes quite a slow flanking route. And God forbid, if you had on the left hand side that Jeep or Alien had also moved and cut off the route to the trailer, or that whole flanking route, then if both those events had happened together, all of a sudden you're in a Nuketown scenario where all you've got is that middle push that you can make through the middle. So you can go crazy, but we'll go on to the next one because that could change it yet again. So here we go. Grim, it appears that your rectangle in the very middle has grown a slong. Yes, I'm aware of that. As you can see, our bean juice on the left has rescinded, and obviously the little alien has gone back and sat on his perch. But this is my final example of potential dynamic event, and this one's probably the most crazy I've gone for. The tower in the middle can collapse. At any given time, you could be sat in it or whatever, and it can collapse. Now, I've got 3 various scenarios, and all of these are, again, it doesn't have to happen. It can happen at any time during the game. It can happen at the very beginning of the game, at the end of the game, in the middle of the game, whenever. It can happen at any time. Or, as I said before, it can never happen. But you could have it so that the tower, again, you could have this based on damage that it takes, or you could just have it on that it's a timed thing, and this happens. So in this example, I've got it so that it collapses across the middle of the map. For those domination players, it would basically cut off wood from the BDOM flag, so that you cut straight across. Now basically you're dividing that middle conflict area in two, so it's not quite a head-on firefight. You're creating new routes within the middle bit. It's a bit weird, but imagine, because that area is quite wide open, imagine Nuketown, where you've got the school bus and you've got the lorry. It would be like that. You'd basically have this structure now obstructing the middle and changing lines of sight and that sort of thing. But you could also have this scenario. Now in this scenario, you can see that the tower has actually now collapsed towards what would be the A flag in domination, cutting off that top flanking route. So again, doesn't seem that crazy or that dramatic. I mean, obviously the tower collapsing will be dramatic, but the actual, well, yeah, you've cut off that top bit, okay, so what? But in fact, without knowing it, it dramatically affects how the map's navigated. Good players will have their routes. Some will do a lap around the map, some will, potentially that route there. You see where you have the gold star to the right hand side? Now a lot of people would camp in there with an LMG. Big long line of sight up to the big top left gold star, the toilets or decontamination area there. Big long line of sight. That tower collapsing across there, one, cuts off that route, it cuts off that line of sight, and it suddenly makes top wood, or the wood rather than top tin, it makes that wood structure there far safer, because you can't get somebody flanked around the back of you. So, on to the final example. Again, not going to dwell on this one too much. It's basically the same as before. Instead of collapsing on the B dom or on the A dom, it's actually collapsed backwards, cutting off the slope coming up from firing range. So a lot of people would spawn trap there. You'd aim, ADS at that little bunker, the little timber fence bit, ADS down into firing range, pick people off. Now you've completely cut that off, so they have to use, if say you were spawning down that end, you'd have to use the left or the right. But potentially you could also have that area flooded and whatever, and you're cutting off that whole side of the map. But again, that's the nature of the dynamic events. That's what makes it kind of interesting. But not going to dwell on this. Let's get on to my final little bit, and that's about spawning in this crazy world. Dear God, Grim, it would appear two dead flies have been squashed onto your firing range picture. Excuse me. No, that's not actually the case. These are representing, supposedly, if you guys have watched Drifter's video about the how you're going to load up the dynamic loading screens where you'll zip in from a helicopter, I've kind of taken that and gone further with it. Now, all of this is pure me guessing and speculating and just having a bit of fun. But here we go. I will go on to my new spawning system. Now, first off, if I go with Drifter's thing of that you slide in from a helicopter, the orange and the blue circle represent the concentration of where your team is based. So at the very start of the game, you're based, underneath your helicopter because that's where you're spawning from. You zip in from the helicopter, and it's all good. But I'm going to carry that theme on and say that what if you always spawn from the helicopter? So when you skip that, kill cam where somebody's killed you, you actually zip in back from the helicopter. You could be halfway down the rope, just to make it quicker, because you don't want to almost create a timer for when you've died, because you've got to get out the helicopter, slide down the rope. You don't want that. Some people just want to get straight back in the action. So that's at the very start of the game. What if you're actually in the middle of the game? What happens then? Well, let's have a look. Now, this is the very last slide. I promise you, panic not. But here you've got blue team is now set up in top wood, and the orange team is set up in top tin. The helicopters now granted the orange one hasn't moved very far, but the blue one has moved. The helicopters work out within set points that have been obviously designed by Infinity Ward, would fly to as close as they can get to the team without basically exposing you to enemy fire. So the helicopter would hover up and try and keep you in the fight. So it would favour aggressive teams, certainly in objective game mode. So if your team was playing capture the flag and you wanted to, your whole team is sat on the enemy flag, the helicopter is going to move up as far as it can and still be in safety. Now, this has a twofold effect. Firstly, for new players who are inexperienced with the game and not very good at reading spawns, you're going to see this big Black Hawk helicopter sat there, and you're going to know that's where the enemy spawn, that's where they're zip roping. Now, you're going to be thinking, oh, well, hang on a second, Grim, that's a fucking stupid idea, because I'm just going to shoot the guy as he zip lines down. No, because you and I know they're going to be immune. Until they hit the ground, their gun's up and they're ready to go, they're going to be immune from damage. It's literally just an animation. They're not actually their player till their feet are on the ground and they've got their gun up in front of them, exactly as if they'd spawned. Also, you're going to say, well, that makes it really easy for me to take out, enemy players, because I know exactly where they're spawning. I'm a good player. I can run up, sit there with my LMG, and I can pick them off once they've landed from the helicopter. Granted, you could do, but you could potentially have a team thing of, I don't know, you'll press the back button and whatever. You could actually, whereas dynamically it will follow the team, you could actually vote and say, look, the helicopter needs to move, it's in a bad position, and the helicopter will actually move, governed on, the majority of the team agreeing with a vote to move the helicopter. Also, if to try and stop spawn trapping, ignoring blind eye or anything like that, the helicopter could actually, pointing out of two doors, have miniguns on either side. So if you're sat there trying to aim at the helicopter to take them out, doesn't work, because the helicopter, you have no blind eye, nothing can protect you. If you get within a certain radius of this helicopter, it will just open fire on you while somebody is ziplining down to protect them. So you've got, say, 5 seconds of protection. As soon as you hit the ground, you've got 5 seconds where you can hear the miniguns on the helicopter go, just spinning up. So if you get too close at that point, they're just going to mow you down. These are just crazy ideas to sort of make the maps a bit more dynamic and flowing and get rid of the predictability that we have with current Call of Duty maps. Now, the final thing I will say on this, and I've got to admit this is the only game mode I've thought about it. In all other game modes, the helicopter would be invulnerable, because you don't want to take it down, and I did think you could potentially take the helicopter down and then it would give a respawn delay, but I don't really want that. They took the respawn delay out of TDM on hardcore because people didn't want it, so it's unfair to bring it into core. But I did think the only time potentially that helicopter could be taken down would be, say, in capture the flag. The enemy flag is actually on their helicopter. So you could take down the helicopter, it crashes, and that's where the enemy flag is. Just that was just a thought, literally, that just came to me. So there you go. But sorry guys, this took like 20 minutes to explain, but I didn't want another fuck up. The last video I did kind of didn't get across the message that I wanted to. So yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think it'll be like this? Do you think it'll be something else? Let me know. And apologies for last video. Hopefully this explains what I was trying to get across a little bit better. Even though, as I say, it looks like a 5-year-old's PowerPoint presentation. But have a good one, guys, and I will catch you laters.